Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician, and this is a special video. Don't know how long this is going to be. It'll be as long as it needs to be. But we're going to talk about table wash controls, controlling cards in a table wash, or appearing to control cards in a table wash in some cases. I have a few different techniques that I prefer to use. This is the Common Magician channel. I try to gear everything we do on here toward the people that are using basic rudimentary methods. Some of these are very basic rudimentary methods. Most of what we're going to look at is accessible with some practice. We're not going to look at anything that I would consider to be terribly complex or difficult, but some of it is going to require some intermediate capability and some preparation and practice to execute. A couple things about this particular topic. There are people out there that do table wash controls exceptionally well, and much of what they're doing involves essentially doing what it looks like they're doing. There are some folks out there that you can pay for sessions to learn their secrets, and some of their secrets have been passed down through giants and card magic. Where do I come off giving an open tutorial on the subject when you have those individuals and that kind of information and sort of those prerequisites to learning that kind of information? Paying someone for it, going through the necessary hoops and the kind of tiers of accomplishment before you arrive at that sort of material. Where do I come off presenting this for free on this channel? Well, first of all, I could charge for what I'm going to show you. I could, make a video download out of this, but I don't feel qualified to do so. I don't think, I think if you really want to learn the big stuff, I think you wouldn't pay me for it, right? You would pay one of those people that have a great deal of experience in card magic. My experience in card magic is limited. It's quite limited to what you see here and what we've discussed over the years on the channel, and the things that I put out on Penguin. I try to put out stuff when I put out a product. I try to put out things that are unique and as original as I can make it, right? That's why I don't have a lot of products, because I'm not constantly coming up with brand new ideas. I'm not an effect mill. Okay, that's not what I do. I make my living elsewhere, and as I come up with ideas and that I feel are marketable, I market them at a fair price. Okay, this is not something that's terribly original. Nothing that I'm going to discuss here is very original. Some of it is stuff that I have come up with on my own, but I wouldn't consider it original. I think there's some very obvious things that other people have been doing for a long time that you'll find in literature and similar kind of publications talking about similar ideas here. So I can't in good conscience put this out as a paid download. And at the same time, I can't really charge for it. I'm just sharing what I think on this subject. Likewise, because some of the stuff that we're going to be looking at, most of it, in fact, is going to be fairly rudimentary and accessible, just isn't worth that much. It's not in-depth training where I would hold your hand on a Zoom call or via video conference or in person and guide you through your questions and details. And again, I'm not qualified to do so. So just 5-minute kind of preface here to this discussion. I think I'm justified in sharing what I know because of the limitation of what it is. The fact that it's my own thinking on this. This is not thinking that I'm taking from anybody else. Whatever inspirations I have to share, I will share them openly when the time comes. And I think I'm free to do that. Absolutely, I can share what I think about the subject. And I welcome you to take some of these ideas and take them further, make them your own, find other ways to expand on them. These are the things that I've used in presentations that you have seen on here. So, and I'm gonna share all of it. I don't think I'm gonna hold anything back here. I'm not about keeping big secrets on this channel. The whole point here is to get people to engage, those that are willing to seek out my content and learn something from it and apply it and share back as you have comments to make. So be welcome to do that as well. So table washes. There is many ways that we can go about this, many directions from which we can kind of attack the subject. And I can't really define a clear order by which we can do that. What we're going to do is we're going to look at kind of compartmentalized areas of table washing, and focus on one area at a time, and where they overlap, we'll circle back around and pick up on that overlap. Okay, so I know I feel like I'm making word salad here, but you'll see in a minute, there's not really a very good direct continuum to follow this. I have a number of notes here. So I think the first thing we need to do is that we need to establish preliminary presentation, particularly when we're dealing with slugs and stacks. So when you're dealing with slugs and stacks, there's a preliminary presentation that you want to give before you do what you're going to do. That might involve a shallow spread. So for example, I have a deck of cards here that does have a slug, and what I'm going to do is show you the cards to start with. And if you didn't see the slug, that's good, because I used what I call a shallow spread. There's a big chunk up here that contains the slug at the top. It could be at the bottom, it could be in the middle. But I'm spreading such that you're seeing 3/4 of the deck, half to 3/4 of the deck, and the slug is kind of hidden away up here. Now this seems very obvious. It seems so obvious that it's something you would think that no one would try doing. One piece of advice that I can give you from what I've learned, if there seems to be an obvious solution to a problem, use it. Don't ignore the obvious just because it's obvious. For years and years, I've seen people talk about hiding a card that's in the deck as if to make it disappear from the deck. There are various kinds of gimmicks that you can make in gaffs that will sandwich a card or force a card that's part of a gaff and then cover it up, or rough, smooth kind of principles. But it wasn't until I saw more than one magician, some really big names, just simply demonstrate that they take a card, they cull it, and then they block it off in the back, and then they hold it back as they show the spread. And that's it. And that's how they make it disappear. They literally just hold the card back on the top behind another card. It is that simple. That seems so obvious that you would never do it. But there it is, giants in the field doing exactly that. So if something seems obvious, use it. Just because it is obvious doesn't make it unusable. So this is obvious. There's a slug on the top. I'm hiding it by keeping it in a very close spread at the top, and I'm showing the rest of the stack this way. And the reason why we need to do that in this case is because you can see what my slug is. It's all of the hearts. So it's a 13-card slug. It's 1/4 of the deck here I have accounted for in the very top. So that's the slug we'll deal with when we get there. So preliminary presentation. Whenever you're dealing with a stack or a slug, particularly if the slug needs to be hidden away, use a shallow spread, use a face-up spread. If you're using a stacked deck, so it's a mem deck, a memorized stack, you can certainly show the whole thing. You might want to be off by 1 or 2 cards, at least 1 card, so that way when you show your spread and you can look at it cleanly, you can easily thumb 1 card to the bottom to get back to normal order. Later on, when that spread is looked at again, the simple change of 1 card at the face from what it looked like before can absolutely play forward the illusion that the cards have been shuffled from the order that they were in. Just that one little detail. It's an obvious thing. If you find an obvious solution, go for the obvious solution. It is probably sufficient. Okay, so that's kind of the preliminary setup. So preliminary presentation is an important concept, I think, when using slugs and stacks. It's not something you always have to do, but whenever you're doing something like this, where you're going to maybe pull out an entire set of an entire suit group, you probably want to have that preliminary presentation that displays that everything's out of order so far as they can tell. Even though I don't see any hearts in there, this simple presentation, you can see I'm even giving some hand cover over here. This simple presentation is very, very useful before continuing on with your table wash. Okay, I can think of a table wash in kind of three different categories. One is a true wash where you have a deck switch. That's a possibility. Okay, you could switch the deck. So we'll start with that. You could wash the cards legitimately and deal with the situation by merely switching the deck after the wash has been done. Or start with the deck, do a switch, wash them, bring the next deck in. I'm not going to belabor this and go over it because it's pretty self-explanatory and there's many different kinds of deck switches out there. I'm a fan of, and I don't use it very much, but I'm a fan of Cold Case, which is a very, very good shell, deck shell, box shell that's used for switching. That's one of my more favorited switching devices if you're going to use a device to do a switch. Otherwise, my favorite way to do a switch is to use the deck, pocket the deck, and bring another one out. Or set it aside, or set behind a large object for a moment, move the large object. There's a lot of ways to switch. I tend to go for, in the few times I've ever had to do switches for any kind of trick that you've seen here, or the very few times I ever do it in person, I go for the easy way out, right? So put it behind something, switch the deck in the motion of moving something else, and then you pick up what is there. There's a lot of other ways to do it. You can do cut switches where you're ringing in a cooler by apparently cutting the deck, and you actually switch the deck in that way. There's a couple of video downloads and instructions you can find on that. Ben Earl has one. Benjamin Earl has a really good video download for that. So deck switch, that's number one. That's a possibility. So don't ever, I think, pigeonhole yourself into one way of doing things. You have to realize that sometimes a particular kind of effect may dictate that you do a certain kind of control, and there are cases where the deck switch is the better way to do it. It just has to be absolutely fair. There are way too many cards involved, and it still needs to be fair. It's better to just switch the deck. So I'm just going to put that out there, okay? So deck switch, that's one possibility. The second category, and we'll work down to kind of the simpler one, and then we'll do the demonstration starting with the simpler one and going back up to complex. The second one is some kind of a false shuffle, an entirely false shuffle. And I would point to people like Leonard Green, who have made a living out of doing stack routines using full stack, and they will do a false shuffle, completely false shuffle on the table, and that is how they accomplish it. That has limited believability for magicians, obviously. A magician looking at a false table wash will recognize it right away. But that doesn't stop me from using it whenever it's appropriate. So a false wash, and we'll look at a couple here in a moment. And then the third kind is a real control. You actually have the cards that are used in play, and you need to control them in some way. And this branches off into a couple of different categories. One is that you remove those cards from the wash for a moment, just intermittently, and then you bring them back in after the wash is done. That's one possibility. Another one is you hold out the slug from the start, and then you bring it in as the cards are collected. That's a kind of a variation on that idea, and we'll look at both of those. And then another variation on that is to watch the slug, keep track of the slug on the table or the card, because you could control one card, and you just keep track of it, and you shuffle around it, and then you bring it back in. And if you do so, there's certain ways to keep track of where it's at using a gaff card or by visually doing that. Those are probably the more difficult ways to do, particularly slug table shuffles, trying to keep track of an array of cards like 1/4 of the deck, 13 cards in a slug. You can do it, but it gets a little bit more complicated. Single card is not so difficult. Okay, so those are kind of the different categories: deck switch, false shuffle, and actually controlling the stuff that's in the deck and trying to keep track of it as you do the shuffle. So let's look at the false wash first. Okay, so I'm going to show you two, and this is not new information. I've actually shared these before in other videos, but just because we're on the topic, I'll do it all here in one shot. So I have a deck. This is actually in stack. This is in the stack that I use. You wouldn't recognize it, but 3 of spades is on the face down here. And the way that I would do a false wash, several ways that I would do it. One is to do, this is the Leonard Green kind of wheel presentation, where you dribble the cards out, and then what you do is you bring the top card back around so that it tucks underneath the bottom card. Then you bring the cards together, and what I do, the way I do it, he does kind of a comedic spin, right, which I think really gives away what's going on a little bit. What I do is I break the cards in the middle and I push forward so that I'm actually pushing the joinment of the top and the bottom out through the center. And then I bring the cards together. And it really is short. It's very quick like that. I don't, scramble around. I'm trying to keep good control, and I want to take low risk. That's one. Now, the situation I'm in is that the cards are cut. So either I would look at the face and then I would cut, or I would use some kind of a key. In this case, I actually have a key. I have a short. So I have a top, I have a short all the way around. It's actually short top to bottom and side to side, and then it's been re-rounded, and I keep that on the top. So now I'm back in my stack and I'm ready to go. So that's one. Another way to do this is the zipper, which is a very similar kind of idea. And again, I've shared this before, where you dribble out and back. And what you do is you just start pressing together the cards from the apex, from the point out here, and then you push them together as if you are closing up a zipper. You're taking two parts and interlacing them. That is not what is happening, actually. What has happened here is I have a continuous track going up, like stairs, and then coming back to a second flight of stairs. And then I can bring this together like this, end to end, and I'm actually still completely in stack. I haven't changed anything about this. So that is another one. So you have the wheel and you have the zipper. Again, very closely related to Leonard Green ideas that have been out there for many years now. Another nuanced application of this, which we'll talk about a lot more later on, is to use, again, a Leonard Green name that he's applied to this concept, which is the Rosetta. Now, normally when you're looking at a Rosetta Shuffle, you're taking two packets and spinning them to make kind of a rose figure and then pushing them together. He has a false way of doing that. But to spin the cards, one thing is that this, for magicians, justifies that you're not using a stripper deck because the cards are changing position in terms of their orientation. But also, this creates more of a shuffled appearance. If I do this on one side of the mat and then I rub this over, this looks more like a mess immediately. It really is just a table spread. It's just that the cards are kind of pinwheeling around over to this orientation over here. Now, if I do that and then I follow up with the same kind of idea, if I tuck the top card under the bottom card and then push this forward, this looks a lot more like a real table wash. And we should be all set to go. I just need to cut the deck to get it back into the orientation that I need it. And there we have our three of spades at the bottom. There's the top. So you can apply that to the wheel or the zipper if you do your Rosetta and then just push out and then bring back again and then push them together. It creates a very muddled picture. We'll use that again later on when we try actually tracking groups of cards. So we'll cover those. Those are complete false washes on the table. Using those two techniques, the wheel and the zipper. Those are the two that I use. I don't go much further than that. I don't see a need to do that. But if I need to maintain a full stack or I want to keep it very controlled with a large slug, I will do one of those two. Now let's get into, we're going to actually go to the other side of the equation and talk about single cards. a single card control. This is really, really quite straightforward. Controlling a single card involves controlling a single card. That's it. You're literally just keeping track of one card. That's all you're doing. So in our case, if we have the Joker shuffle deck, and the Joker is going to be our control, all we're going to do is wash the cards and glue our eyes to that one. Here is what you need, though, because preliminarily you actually need to have a setup that allows you to do this where it will look fair. And I'll talk about some techniques that I use for keeping track of one card. Before we do that, it is not enough, I think. I've done this on the channel before and probably been called out for it as well. It's not enough to just throw it on the top and start washing the deck, start washing the cards. I think what you need to do preliminarily, kind of like when using a large slug or a stack, doing some kind of a spread demonstration, there's another kind of preliminary setup we need to worry about. I need to get this lost before I lose it. I need to lose it before I lose it good. Okay? And the way that that can be done is a number of different controls. You could either use any sleight that you know where you put a card in the deck and control it to the top or the bottom. You could, spread cull it. You could shift. You could palm shift it out. You could side steal it, whatever you want to do, okay? For me, because we're dealing with a table, the easiest way I know, going back to the last video series where we're talking about riffle shuffles and basic controls, what I do is I put it on top, and then I do a double undercut holding a break over the card. I split, here's the card, and then I go into the riffle, and I'm actually burying the last top card that they saw, and I'm bringing the card back to the top. So I do a simple riffle shuffle sequence before I go into the wash. And now I'm free and clear to track this top card because I've lost it before I lose it good, right? That's the idea. So card is there. It's placed on top, double undercut twice, riffle it to the top, close it up, and then I go into my wash. And this is straightforward. One thing you want to do is muddle up the picture as much as possible. This is where we'll return to the Rosetta. I think it's a good idea to spin the cards like this, and then you can start washing. It's simple. What I want to do is two techniques. I favor the second one more than the first. The first one is to keep a visual on it. That's harder than it seems if you really want to be messy. The second one, and you can do a combination of these, the second one is to keep physical contact. So I prefer to keep physical contact if I have to track one card in a fair deck. What I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to pass this card around and keep it on a finger somewhere as I am moving the cards around. So I keep it in my hand no more than a few seconds. I might deposit it off for a moment, right, before I come back and grab it again and move it around. What happens here is that in the picture, you lose track of where this card is at visually as a spectator, but I know where it is. Now, I need to get this controlled to a place where I can get back to it again. This is where you can employ one of two options. You can either pick it up last and put it on top, or you do what I prefer, which is to scoop it to the bottom. So what I do is I will get to a point where I grab that card and then I'll scoop. I'll scoop a chunk like this, and now I have it controlled to the bottom, and then I can scoop another chunk. And once I get a bunch of cards here, I can let some fall off as I pick up, because it really makes this look random, right? And then scoop up again, scoop up again. If I've controlled it to the bottom, I don't want to put it outward like this so it can be seen. I want to bring it inward and then fold it up this way. That is one option. So literally, one card, you are preliminarily losing it so that you can lose it good, but actually controlling it by keeping a hand on. Simple as that. Okay, that is one technique for one card in the deck. You could also lose it good by using a key. So I have a key card. This is a double fit card, or it could be a short or a mark, but probably I would go with something that is tactile. I think that's better, something that can be felt for the cut. And what I do is I get this so that it is either over or under. I think it's better when it's under. I have this sitting on top. I have the card return to the deck, and then I can actually fairly cut it in. I don't need to do a shuffle of any other kind. I can literally cut it in, or I could single cut it into the center of the deck. Now, there's several ways to deal with this. This is my favorite one. I'll just show you this one. And I talk about this on a video download that I have out there, Spare Key on Penguin, where I talk about the double thick card, and this is one of the ways in which I use it. If I dribble the cards right now onto the table, because there's a double thick card, there will be a stutter at the moment where the thick card meets the card of interest, and it will actually manifest on the table. I do that and you'll see this gap. Now, this is not something that the audience perceives. The spectators don't see that, but in the middle of the deck, I know exactly where this is. I can feel where it happened, and I actually have a visual. I can recognize this discrepancy right here. What I need to do is just avoid this area, these couple of cards here, and I know that the card immediately after the gap and the card immediately before the gap need to go together. Now all I need to do is do a fair wash of everything over here and just let that lie. So I do my wash over here. I can bump them and get close, and then what I do is I pick up my key, which is the card immediately before the gap. I scoop up the card of interest and anything near it or above it, and then I go into my scoop again. And then I can complete this by scooping the key card, which is also a joker in this case, over my card of interest, and then everything on top of that. Turn it toward myself, orient everything. And what's really neat about this is I can actually close this down by giving a fair cut. Like that. I could even go into a table sequence and I can shuffle. What I want to do though is I want to maintain now, if I cut at the key card, which I did by happenstance here, I want to keep this at the bottom and keep my key at the top. Or I want to keep them close to each other. Okay, so if I do this and break up, my key's on the top. Double thick card always cuts to the top like that. Card of interest is at the bottom. I can do fair riffles like this, and then I can do a cut, fair cut, bringing my card of interest onto the key again. And then if I want to get this to the top or bottom, it just depends on how I cut to my key. If I cut to my key by putting it underneath, I now put my card on the bottom above the key. If I cut the key to the top, I put the card of interest on the bottom with the key on top, but I know where it's at so I can get back to it. If I want to get it to the top, I can control it to the bottom. I can drop it, get a break, and then I can do a fair strip until I get to last card and bring it to the top. A lot of ways to deal with it. All I'm doing is using the key to get it back under my control after the wash. And I use the way that it manifests on the dribble in the wash to identify where it's at. That is a favorite of mine. I love to use a double thick card as a key to help me maintain a table wash of one card, single card, or a very small group. You can do like 3 or 4 cards like that. Once you get more than 3 or 4 cards, though, I think you need to use some different strategies to maintain where it's at. I have used the double thick card to try to keep together, you know, as many as 10, 13 cards before, but it really muddles up. Rather, it's difficult to muddle up the wash because you have this stretch of cards. It's very obvious. It doesn't change orientations. We'll talk about that later on when we look at slug. So those are the ways that I deal with single card. 1, watch it. 2, feel it. That's my favorite. 3, use a key to designate where it's at, keep it out of the wash, and then bring it back in with a scoop at the end, and you've controlled it. So that is dealing with a single card. Those are my thoughts on that. Make sure I didn't miss anything. Make sure that you keep it moving. If you're going to be controlling that one card fairly in a wash from the top or bottom, you want to make sure that it's always on the move. Don't let the card sit. Don't get it out way out in the away, do this, and then go grabbing it. Okay? Make sure it's always on the move and always keep it switching hands. Don't keep it on one hand. And I highly recommend that you always keep it in hand. Don't let it sit for a moment because you can easily lose track of what you're doing if you get it out of your tactile control. Okay. Yeah, let's look now at slugs. So slug control. We'll come back to this deck. I've got here a slug of all of the hearts, and then I have a key card above that. I highly recommend using a key card when dealing with a slug, because what you want to do is you want to try to lose the slug somewhere into the middle in the wash, because that helps with the illusion of mixing. And if you do that, you'll need a way to get back to it. So you would want to use some kind of a key. The key can be as subtle as you want. It could be as subtle as a breather crimp. However, if you're going to use a breather crimp in that way, make sure it's really laid in good, that the work is really, really deep so that it's dependable and it won't get flattened out when you're washing. I'm using a double thick card here, double thick joker over top of my hearts. So, preliminary display, quick. I don't have to let this sit out there for a while. My slug is protected at the top. I could try to mix using this. I highly recommend doing this though. If I have a slug that's this big, 13 cards, what I might do is take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards, keep them at the top, break, and then put the next set of cards with the key on the bottom. What my goal is going to be is to get this back on top of that somewhere in the deck together. Okay, so that is what I want to do. I could do a presentation of this where I go shallow at the beginning and shallow at the end, and you see just the center. You don't see any hearts altogether. You see a 6 of hearts, which is inconsequential because it's from the middle of the spread and it's at the bottom. Pretty good illusion here for a quick show. I close this up and then I go into my shuffle sequence. So here, let's look at this one. I'm going to start with the Rosetta over here on the my left. I'm going to spin the cards down, and then what I'm going to do when I get this nice and jumbled up, I'm going to spread these off to the right. So now I've got kind of an array, what already looks like a shuffled mess. And what I highly recommend, I should have started this over a little bit further, what I highly recommend is that you get a wide group here and immediately control the cards that you need to have in your control. I know that I need 7 from here and about 7 from here. So what I'm going to do immediately is reach down and grab a clump that's going to match my 7. So I can see 3 cards here, 3 more in another. I'm just going to reach down and grab whatever will fit in my hand, which is going to be more than what I want. And right away I'm going to take this and I'm going to scoop to the top. Now this is useful because I'm taking top cards from the deck and I'm mixing them with bottom cards from the deck. This already looks fair. It looks like a fair and clean shuffle, right? So I'm going to grab a group here, and then I'm going to make a mess of this as I then scoop more cards. And I'm going to make a mess and scoop more cards, and make a mess and scoop more cards, and then the last bit. And you've seen cards change order. You've seen things go top to bottom in different directions, right? You might even scoop back and forth on different parts of this to really change the picture. But what I have done is I have controlled my slug back together from 2 sections, one in the top, one in the bottom, and I've done it in a pretty fair looking way. Now, does this look like the typical kind of wash? No. Does it look fair? Yeah, it looks pretty fair. It looks like a mess, right? I'm mixing different groups everywhere. Some can fall out once I get my slug put together in the first 2 pickups. Now what I have is a situation where my slug is together right here. A couple cards of margin at the bottom, and I've got my key card sitting on top. As soon as I get this back on the table, I can give a back riffle and I can feel where the key is at. The key will be on top of the slug and it will go down, and I can see I've got 3/4 of the deck sitting on top of that. I'm set up to do some table riffles if I want to. I could lift the top maybe 1/3, so I've got a 1/3 here, 2/3 over here. I'm going to riffle up. This will pop at the key card. My slug is protected underneath the key, and then I'm going to riffle everything above the key. One thing that I like to do when I'm trying to protect the visual of a large group of cards is I will push forward on the covering packet like I would with a zero shuffle, my type of zero, and then I will square everything up. And I can do this actually burying the top card both times. And now I have a situation where I have my key card, my slug is protected, I've got shuffled cards above that. When I want to get my slug to the top, I will pick up the cards and I will riffle down with my thumb until my double thick key pops up to the top packet. I drop this to the table, I drop my slug on top, and now I'm set with my whole set here, 13 cards in the slug after having apparently done a fair table wash. So that is my favored control. Again, you can do this with the slug altogether, but it's a lot of cards. I highly recommend, if your slug is large, break it up into two, part on top, part on the bottom. Use a key. A double thick card is my favorite way to go. I've used it many, many, many times on the videos that you've seen on here, just to keep track of that, and then you can bring it together. Grab the top, shove it under the bottom, mix around, pick up more, get it all together, and then you're off to the races, as they say. So that is mixing a large slug. Other ways that you can do that, you can hold out. You can hold out. So let's talk about that briefly. If I get rid of my key card for a minute and I take my slug up to a quarter, no more than that, up to a quarter, I can actually keep this out. If this sits with a bit of a bevel one way or the other, 3/4 of the deck looks enough like a full deck. I can even spread, show it, close up. I can do a fair, table wash using these cards. And then what I want to do is whenever I take the cards back, I will introduce my slug to the cards. So I would collect them all together like this so I can manage them with one hand. And then I bring my hand back to the back of the table. I could use a holdout on the table, or I can pick up from my lap. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring these back on top of my slug. It is as simple as that, okay? That seems obvious, but I'll be honest with you. It works very well. It's a very good way to do it, especially if you're using a holdout. If you're using a holdout device, you can actually keep your hand in close proximity. You bring you place your hand underneath to pull the cards off of the holdout. You see open palm, thumb above that. This is very deceptive, right? And you're just holding the cards out under the table. However, if you want to keep a slug in the deck and then remove it, there is a way to do that. I prefer to do this with preparation. I recently posted a video where I was doing this very kind of thing. So again, big slug, 13 cards. I might have a bit of a bridge on these cards. So there's a little bit of a gap there. And then I'll have this sitting on the top. And I'm set to do my preliminary presentation. I can show a shallow spread, given some cover over here. I can pick up, and now what I have, because I have that bridge there, I can actually easily pick up at it without having to feel around and find it. We'll look at this in a minute, doing it blind from a cull, which is a very useful way to do this as well. But I can pick up, and now I'm set to cop. So I can do gambler's cop. I lift, I push back into the palm, I push forward and spread, and because I have that bridge in there, this is incredibly smooth. It's very, very smooth, right? I do my spread, pick up. I'm already face up because I'm coming up from the spread. I go back and I come forward. I've copped it. I've already copped the cards. Now I can reach out like this because they're face up. I can reach out, grab the deck from the front, bring the hand back in copped position at the edge of the table, set the cards down. My hand is still in view, right? Copping out the slug that I need. I can do my Rosetta one-handed, right? Like this. Now, this is where it gets really sneaky. I could drop these cards to a holdout, right? Or to the lap. I could drop it in any other place, or I could hold on to them. But I cannot shuffle with these cards in hand and cop. It's not really possible, right? But what I can do is I can convert from gambler's cop to more of a tenkai. So I'm kind of situated with an oddly angled Tenkai palm. All I have to do is squeeze and bring my thumb over and grab the far corner, and now I'm into a Tenkai kind of situation, right? So I'm in Kop, I convert to Tenkai, I'm giving cover so I can do this. I don't have to be, you know, Mr. Smooth Fingers about it, because it's back here, it's out of view. But it transitions very easy. You have Kop, then you have Tenkai. Kop, Tenkai, Kop, Tenkai, right? So I'm in Kop, I go to Tenkai, as I then start to mix these cards. Now what I can do is, because my hands are going to be busy, the goofiness of the Tenkai hold doesn't really show up very well. And I can keep my hand flat on the table so I don't get any view of the palm from underneath. What I do want to do is I need to watch angles. This works perfectly well for a screen like this where people are watching from the front. If I had people sitting here, though, I would want to keep elbows more out, and I want to do this symmetrically so that I can keep a little bit of finger cover. The nice thing about this is that because there's going to be a mess of cards on the table, even if my palm cards are seen, even if they're face up, through the windows, they're not really noticed because they fit in camouflage with everything on the table, okay? So I've gone from Kop to Tenkai, and then I can come out here and I can continue to do a wash. Now, I'm already holding out in a tricky kind of situation, so I don't need to spend a lot of time here. What I will do is I will then use this hand with palm cards to shovel towards the other hand, and I'll pick up cards. As soon as I got a good group of them, I can then pick them up and put them in hand. I can drop my slug on the top or the bottom. If I want to drop it on the top, I will continue to pick up cards. I'm holding in Tenkai behind the group in front. And I will keep adding cards, right? When I'm ready, I can just pretend like I'm picking up a group of cards and just bring these cards out and drop them on top. Very openly. I have cards in my hand. I don't have to be covert about this, right? I just bring them around, drop them on top, pick up the last group, put them on the bottom, square up, and I'm back where I started with my group of cards now sitting on the top, and I'm ready to go from there. Obviously, if I want to drop them to the bottom, this is very good for the bottom deal, right? So again, just kind of take us back where we were. I go into Kop, I put this out here, I Rosetta, I switch to Tenkai, and then I do my table wash. Try to keep elbows out to keep good coverage. I shovel in. Once I have enough cards to pick up, I can put them into hand. If I want to drop this to the bottom, I can either put it on flat, which is a little awkward, or what I like to do, I think I did on one of the presentations I did recently, is try to stack it up against and keep control of the group separate from the others, and then drop it to the table. So I have the cards sitting flat on the table as I get these organized. And then what I can do is, once I have this, it's awkward to do it from the side so you can see. But once I get this all squared up, this is strange. Once I get this squared up, there we go, I can just drop these down on top of the other cards and immediately get a break. So now I have a thumb break automatically, and I have my cards in place. This is good for bottom dealing or any other kind of control. I'm actually set up right here to muddle up the picture even more, because I've got a break over my group. I can do a strip. This is a fair strip, and the last section I throw on was from the break, which is the slug, and I'm ready to rock and roll. So a lot of different controls you can control to the top or the bottom by copping from face up, Tenkai, mix, keep good coverage. Doesn't work well if you have people sitting over there or very high on this side. Good for social media, right? And then return the slug back top or bottom wherever you want it. So that is holding out, either holding out a group from the start, holding out under the table, gathering at the edge, picking up, copping out, bringing to the back, switch to Tenkai, do the mix in the open, holding in palm, and then reintroduce back in. You can do this with 1 or 2 cards as well, right? You can do it very easily like that. So if you want to have a super, super fair mix, or, you know, this is nothing new. If you want someone else to wash the cards, that's the way to do it. So I've got my group on top, right? I pick up, I do my cop, and then I set the cards out there. I say, could you please go ahead and give the cards a mix, right? They can do that, and I'm sitting here, fairly free and clear, sitting as natural as I can with cards in palm. If I close up, I can get into Tenkai, and I can even gesture in some way or whatever, Personally, I don't think it's smart to tempt the gods, so to speak, right? I just keep it out of the way, or really what I've referred to previously on the channel, because palming is one of my least favorite things. If I'm going to cop, my favorite thing is to dump. I'd rather cop and dump and then be free and clear, because I can always come back and bring the cards back into play, right? As they're mixing the cards up, I can always come back here, bring them back into cop, and then I can take the cards back, turn them over, pick them up, place them back on, and then square up. You have the cards. That's how you deal with a gambler's cop. My favorite kind of a palm, because it's dirty and simple. Okay. I think I've covered just about everything I have to share with you. Yeah, be willing to use any method, including a deck switch. And for me, what's my favorite one? My favorite one is probably using the double thick key card. And if I have a large slug, I split it top to bottom. That's my favorite way. I'd rather have stuff on the table. I'd rather deal with stuff I can see than hold out in cop and palm and Tenkai and all that kind of stuff. I'd rather have it all there and just use some kind of mechanism in the deck to keep track of it. Let's do one more thing, though. What if you have a regular deck of cards? It's actually plastic, prestige rider back deck. No crimps, no doubles, regular cards. Can't crimp them, can't do anything with them. How do you get control and do a call and then go into a wash that looks fair? Well, this is real, okay? If I wanted to get control of some cards, let's say I was going to call out some aces, I would spread, and then what I'm doing is I'm calling my aces as I'm looking through, under the premise of getting my bearings or looking at the cards or just trying to figure out what I have to work with. So this is like a real demonstration, but I'm cheating a bit. What I do is at the very end, when I get to the top card, I push forward on the deck, and this makes a break that I can grab with my pinky from the other side underneath. And those of you who do card culling, you know how this works. So what I can do is I can actually immediately get a pinky break as I square up on those called cards. And this is very good for a cop. What I can do at this point is I can push back, cop, push back, cop, take the cards, go out, and I can go into my Tenkai move, or I can dump or whatever. But I can get my control in that way. If you're only dealing with a few cards, that's not so much that you can't deal with doing a more fair kind of shuffle, just maintaining a few cards, 4 cards like that. So I have them called to the top, and I do my Rosetta, right? And then I spread these out. And what I'm going to do is, if I can get a glimpse of it and I can grab 4 cards, right? I know I have exact number here. I can grab my 4 cards and I can immediately go over here and pick up a group and come back here, and I can pick up a group, and I can come over here and pick up a group and drop some and pick up, right? I can get right into it. So the non-traditional kind of look at a sort of wash, where I go right for the target from the top. I know an exact number. I can spread it to visually see it, grab it, control it. I have it now at the bottom. And now I can get it to the top or put it wherever I want it to, but I've got my 4 aces in place. So you can do a call, get a break, go into cop, Tenkai, deposit, drop it, keep it at the top, do a visual hold on it, or keep it under control, grab the 4 immediately. I'm a big advocate of, if you have a slug that you want to try to shuffle legitimately on the table, is get control of it immediately. Go right for the slug and mix it in with something else, tucking it underneath. That way you have it in hand. So those are my thoughts. So doing it for real from a fresh deck, culling out the cards, and then getting control of them. And the nice thing is that if you have other techniques under your belt, if you can get control in a call, do a table wash and keep them controlled someplace, you can use other techniques to put them into play. You can use a Pharaoh shuffle to stack them. You could get them to the top, and if you're good at riffle stacking, I'm not, I don't do that. ever, right? But if you do riffle stacking, you have them there to do it. You could bottom deal them in. I might do something like that. Keep them on the bottom and then bottom deal them in a gambling demonstration whenever you need them, that kind of thing. You could go into a overhand shuffle, right? Where you shuffle the cards in to place, and then you'll have them for a hand to be dealt, right? So I've done my table wash. I pick up, and now I'm ready to go. We'll see if this works out. So just use other techniques then to get things set up after the table wash. The nice thing about a table wash is that it justifies using other types of shuffling. If you wash the cards, a overhand shuffle is less suspicious, right? Overhand shuffles are very suspicious because you have a lot of control over stacking, as opposed to doing a riffle, table riffle. But if you wash the cards first, it doesn't seem like there could be a lot of control, and you're more justified going into the overhand stacking kind of situation. So that can work in that way. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I think I've shared everything. I really don't have a lot more on it. If I come up with more stuff, I'll share it later on. But there's nearly an hour, 50 minutes or so of time on the table wash as I use it. There are people out there that do amazing things with table controls that far surpass what we've talked about here. But I think the things I've showed you are fully sufficient to do some pretty amazing stuff that will fool even magicians in your magic. So good luck with that. Happy magicking.